have been told is of no importance. You and your companion would be footprints in a time where you were not supposed to walk.
If I have to force my way out of here, I will, you know.
But we may have stumbled on something beyond our understanding.
You see the first faint glimmerings.
Oh, why did you come here? Why? Grandfather, no!
No, you don't!
Stop it! Let him go!
Let me go!
Stop it!
Let me go!
Stop it! Ah!
This is the BBC television service. Well, once again, we have a few moments in hand before the next program, which gives me a welcome chance to explain another of our new logos. You are, in fact, looking at a Mexican riding a bicycle in both directions whilst holding two umbrellas. Very symbolic of what we here at BBC Television are trying to do.
But now we go back further into the history of Lime Grove, when the building was Britain's most prolific film studio, making a complete range of films from 39 Steps, which you can see later, to numerous others, too numerous to enumerate, if you see what I mean. Lime Grove was the home of Hitchcock and Lockwood, indeed a home of real stars, lots of stars, too numerous to mention. Can't remember the names, lovely.
Lime Grove is the forgotten British film studio. Abandoned to television in 1949, for 30 years the studios were the home of filmmakers and stars such as Jesse Matthews, Alfred Hitchcock and Robert Donor. But the most famous star created at Lime Grove wasn't an actor, nor a director, nor a producer. The heyday of Lime Grove came with the Gainsborough lady, the trademark of a group of extraordinarily popular melodramas made in the 1940s and denounced by the critics of the day as potboilers. Gainsborough created a cluster of glamorous and sexy British stars. James Mason, Stuart Granger, Margaret Lockwood, Patricia Rock, Jean Kent, Phyllis Calvert.
Well, this is a very strange experience. I haven't been in these studios for over 51 years. Of course, I don't really remember the studio looking like this. When I came into a studio, I would be dressed in my Regency costume, and there would be a beautiful Regency dining room or a Regency drawing room or a street in Florence, and that was in the Madonna of the Seven Moons. I can remember once when this studio was a railway station with a great train running through it. And the whole thing took place in this studio.
The story of Lime Grove began in the silent days of cinema, just before the First World War.
I used to look at this studio and think, well, I wish I could get a job in there. So one day I plucked up courage and I went across the road and knocked at the little door. It's the little house next to the studio where their offices. And a man in a white coat opened the door. He said, "What can I do for you, young man?" So I said, "Well, I'd like a job in film." He said, "Well, come inside. You can start tomorrow in the laboratory." The principal one that I developed and printed myself was First Man in the Moon. It was H.G. Wells' First Man in the Moon. The director was named Bill Colino, and he had been a circus man. And so he had trampolines put in hollows in the rocks. So when they stepped out of the moon into a trampoline and jumped about 15 feet, to the next trampoline. And so that gave that gravity thing. They would light pretty crude. I mean, they put 2 lamps on one side and 1 lamp on the other. So it was pretty basic, just illumination, not really what we call lighting nowadays. Illumination. In those days, the camera was, the cameramen were pretty basic. I mean, my first cameraman I worked with used to own a laundry, so he went from being a laundryman to a cameraman.
You had to learn to do it from the wrist. Otherwise, you'd shake the camera. I
would always say to myself, 1 tick, 2 tick, 3 tick, 4 tick, 5 tick.
See, it was by the sound of the camera you knew you were going at the right speed.
You could only do a simple pan with this hand. You'd be turning like this, you see, and you'd be panning with the other camera slightly pan to the left or to the right. After 10 years, I was doing everything, like second camera, driving the studio camera car, protecting the rushes, and even editing the film at the end with the director. So you certainly had an all-round experience.
The experience of working at Lime Grove changed dramatically with the coming of sound. The glass studio was replaced at huge expense with state-of-the-art sound stages. In charge of production in the new studios was Michael Balkan. In the 1930s, he was chasing the world market.
In 1932, when the Gaumont British Studios reopened, They were the largest and best equipped sound film studios in Europe. Totally insulated from the sounds of the outside world, from the railway over here and the road over there, by these chicken wire bags filled with kapok. Inside the studio was a hive of activity. Down here, they were building the set for the first major production, Rome Express, a great railway station in the middle of which stood a vast locomotive made entirely of plywood.
Believe me, boys, this is going to be the greatest day for Rome since Julius Caesar was bumped off by the Ides of March. Come on.
The first draft took 6 weeks. I worked with the author of the story, Clifford Gray. I worked on it later, of course, but the first draft was 6 weeks, and I was paid £5 a week, so they got it for £30, essentially.
Charity doesn't seem to get one very far, Mills, does it?
No, sir.
They doubled it afterwards. Mick Balkan doubled it. After it was Christmas, I think he got the Christmas spirit. The atmosphere was rather heady because it was a new studio, and they had a big opening. And they had this locomotive with a set number of carriages on the big stage, stage 4. They built the Gare de Lyon in Paris, rebuilt it, and used 2 stages of the studio and built an arch around the door between the 2 stages so you could pass from one to the other. And they had a lot of notabilities and sent them up in the goods lift, which got stuck.
Rome Express had been an auspicious start for the new studios, but Michael Balkan's big hope for the American market was a West End star, Jessie Matthews.
The birds in the sky keep in time when they fly, way up high as they migrate in spring. Even spring begins in rhythm with my heart. Makes no difference where I go on land or on sea.
The films, mostly directed by Victor Saville, were lavish, ambitious, and technically sophisticated.
I went there when they were shooting a thing which became the favourite piece. It was the piece when they were dancing on the ceiling. And Victor was very bright about it because he built the set in 2 parts, rather like the Ridiculous Studio. It was long before they had sophisticated cranes. They just had a thing on a jib. And when she started tap dancing, if the operator of the camera and the man operating the jib of the crane hadn't been able to follow music, they couldn't have followed the taps.
Despite their craft skills, they made little impact in America. The Americans found them too slow, too stagey, and too English.
With one studio piled on top of another, the only way to link the whole thing together was by means of a lift. And you can imagine what that was like. New scenery and props coming in, old scenery and props going out, and the lift was always breaking down.
It was totally ridiculous. It always had been. I mean, trying to cram into the lift with the crew, with everybody made up to shoot one scene on the 4th floor. By the time you got there, the makeup had dissolved. By the time you got onto the set, the scenes which were rehearsed down in the basement, the people had forgotten what they were talking about. It really was a very difficult studio to work in.
Only when you get up here on the roof that you realise how cramped this site is. Here we are, almost in central London. Over there's Shepherd's Bush Green, then there's a row of suburban houses. Down there, the shops and market stalls of Shepherd's Bush Market, and then right down below us, marking the boundary of the site, the viaduct of the Metropolitan Railway. And the other boundary of the site is Lime Grove, and there's a lime tree still growing in Lime Grove. So the entire width of the studio is fitted into the space between the front door and the back garden wall of a suburban house.
Oh, do stop whistling.
Must be a mile away by now.
Don't do that.
The big stage down below, we did the scene where they're trapped on a humpback bridge and all the sheep, and they used burning cedar wood to make the fog effect.
Hello, what are we stopping for? Oh, it's a whole flock of detectives.
And the sheep, some of them started coughing. And of course it sounds like a human being. And we had to keep trying to find a sheep with a cough to take it outside.
Get out, both of you, and clear them away.
What about him?
I'll soon fix that. There, miss. Now you're a special constable.
What's the idea? What are you
As
doing?
long as you stay, he stays.
If Alfred Hitchcock had died in 1932, he'd be remembered as quite a different director than we remember him now. It was Balkan who signed Hitchcock and launched him on that series of 6 great Gaumont British thrillers that made his name. The films 39 Steps, The Man Who Knew Too Much, Secret Agent, Sabotage, Young and Innocent, and The Lady Vanishes. The films we now think of as Hitchcockian. Suspense, detail, humour. It was these that brought him to the attention of the Americans, and of course the Americans saw the quality. They saw here a director who was sophisticated and not only technically good, but was actually offering something that American audiences could relate to. And so I think that Hitchcock at Lime Grove is one of the great episodes in Lime Grove's history.
Hitchcock was a sadist. He was always playing jokes on people. Like, he had a property man named Paddy. He said to Paddy, look, Paddy, I want to put these handcuffs on you because I want to see how you feel after you're wearing them for some time. You know. And then he put some wallop in his tea to give him diarrhea. So he had to go to the toilet with his handcuffs. And then Hitchcock said he lost the key, so he had to go home. And it was the next day, he said, oh, I'm sorry, Paddy, I found the keys, because he'd hidden them all the time. Sadistic jokes, not very pleasant.
Yes, he murdered 3 wives and got away with it, but his 3rd mother-in-law got the goods on him and tried to have him arrested. Did she succeed? No. He was too quick for her. Took her for a walk to Land's End and shoved her over into the Atlantic Ocean. He's in Madame Tussauds all right, and there's no doubt about his department.
I can remember when we ran the rough cut of A Lady Vanishes, he was sitting in his seat snoring all the way through, and when the lights went up he dictated precise notes of exactly what he wanted to his secretary. He hadn't been asleep all the time.
Now then, there's Hammond, there's the bowler, there's the umpire.
Sugar? 2, please. Dear me, there is no sugar.
Now watch this very, very carefully, Colligan. Grimmett was bowling.
May I trouble you for the sugar, please?
What?
The sugar, please.
Somebody once said about somebody else, I think, that the great thing in life, if you want to get a great reputation, is to keep on doing the same thing very well. And it's a very good recipe. Hitchcock took quite a long time to arrive at that recipe. When he did, he stuck to it as far as he could. and did it very well. And when he got more resources in America, he did it better.
Hitchcock left for Hollywood. Balkan moved on to work for MGM. But Lime Grove's most commercially successful films, the Gainsborough melodramas, were yet to come.
Now, this is the right floor. I think that was the surgery. I don't remember what that was. And down there was...
Oh, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
You don't mind if I talk to you for a moment?
Well, why should I?
Do you know, I think you're the very person I've been looking for. I have a little proposition I think might interest you.
Now, isn't that a coincidence? So have I.
Eh?
They've gone and cut that off. Oh, well. This was the bathroom to Stuart Granger's dressing room. He had this one on Caravan. Also on Magic Bolo. And I know Maggie Lockwood had it too, and I expect Phil Calvert had it one time. And I think Frederick March when he made Christopher Columbus here, but mine was somewhere round here. Here we are, number 46, that's mine. Oh dear.
So take your turn, everybody. Here we are, Jane. Oh. Louisa. Dorothy. Who'd like this one? One for you, and the last one for you. Now, nobody's left out. I've even remembered myself. I'm Clarissa Richmond. Will you have a sugared violet? No, thank you. I don't care for sugary things.
The Man in Grey was the first of the Gainsborough melodramas. A rumbustious Regency adventure with whip-wielding aristocratic lord, glamorous ladies and thwarted love. Wonderfully escapist. Just the thing people wanted to see during the war.
Excuse me, Lady Mark.
Oh, but I wish to present my godchild, Clarissa Richmond.
It's a lovely Richmond, eh?
Ah, then you agree that the sobriquet is suitable? I should think there's about as much truth in it as the things they call you.
Eh? What do you mean?
The Man in Grey. It sounds like a ghost.
Rest assured, I shall never haunt the lovely Richmond.
When it first came out, it didn't get very good notices and people didn't go to see it. It was at the New Gallery. And then it went round the provinces. Well, the provinces were absolutely besotted by it. And it made more money than any other British film had ever made before. And so it was brought back to London and had another premiere. And that's never happened before or since. So it did have something, the old Man in Grey.
She was the famous Regency beauty.
Oh?
Yes, she married the Man in Grey.
Nobody knew that it was going to be such a success. But when it was, they jumped on the bandwagon, of course, and did masses of romance. The Caravan.
Darling, forgive me. I'm sorry. I love you all the time.
Heaven's at your feet.
Tra-la-la-la.
Life is complete. Tra-la-la when love steals your heart.
For all we know, this may be the last time we shall ever lie on this bank. With the roses bending down to look at us.
Don't talk like that. Don't say such things. If you loved me...
I do love you, Nina.
If only I could believe that.
They were all romantic novels, you see, and they all did very well.
Nino!
That wasn't friendly. Anyone else want to say anything?
But what you notice about these films in particular is that there's an all-good woman and an all-bad woman, and an all-bad man and an all-good man. So it's almost sort of mathematical in the way in which it divides up the different characteristics.
To the settlement of our little misunderstanding.
Harry!
The good female roles were played by Phyllis Calvert. The bad female roles were played by Lockwood, the good man by Granger, the bad male by James Mason. Primarily, the men are presented as the object of female desire, virtually for the first time in British cinema. If you look at the presentation of the dress, of Granger, particularly James Mason. I think it's an image of masculinity which had not appeared in British cinema hitherto.
Ladies, come inside and see what your husbands are made of.
Apparently I had it. I had something called sex appeal.
Lazar, do you know what I want more than anything in the world?
No. What?
People used to say to me, "Oh my God, I'm so in love with you. Oh, you were so sexy." And I don't really? Were you? I really didn't know I was this heartthrob.
He always loved to have his shirt open and show his lovely chest and things like that. But, I mean, we all used to pull his leg about that. He didn't seem to mind. I must say there was only one day when he had sardines for lunch and we had to play a love scene, and that's almost unforgivable. It's like eating garlic before a love scene. You just don't do that. And I don't think he did it purposely. He'd just forgotten. But it was absolute hell playing sardine sandwich love scenes.
She didn't approve of me, really. I knew it. There's one scene, a sex scene in Madonna of the Seven Moons, where she has to slap my face.
All that I've had to give, I've given you. Love, money, everything.
Except the truth about where you go.
I tell you, I don't know.
And she pulled back and really whacked me.
Stop asking, will you?
And I grabbed her by the throat and a look of terror that came on her face. And I kissed her. It was a very good scene.
The key thing is really to distinguish between the roles of Granger and Mason. Granger was sort of sexy without being threatening. But the key point about Mason's roles is that he exemplified a kind of dark, forbidden, possibly threatening sexuality.
Mrs. Barbary, one moment, please.
Yes, my lord.
He was Byronic in his looks and his ability to portray a kind of threat.
Whom is Clarissa going to meet?
How should I know?
Don't lie to me.
He obviously made a very major impression on female audiences at the time.
You know, I never can refuse you anything when you're gentle with me. Please. Please! I must do what I know is right.
But you won't. You've never once stood on your own feet. You haven't got the guts. You've whined and crawled ever since the day I was fool enough to marry you. Now go to the devil and stay there.
Just to show you how popular James was, I remember when the film came out in Manchester, I went off to buy a reel of cotton in the local store, and she said, "You're not Dulcie Gray, are you?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "You're not the girl that was hit in the face by James Mason, are you?" And I said, "Yes." And she fainted.
You killed my wife.
She was nothing to you. She never loved you. I love you. Rowan, listen.
You killed a Rowan.
Critic asked audiences if they'd ever had dreams about any films, and several women said they'd had dreams about the last bit of The Man in Grey, where he beats Hester to death.
Women during the war, because many of them were taken out of the home and put in the factories, although they weren't paid as much as men, they gained a greater sense of self-esteem, responsibility and independence. And they were able to identify with many of the anti-heroines of the Gainsborough films.
I want to live in the fashionable world. I want to be admired and talked about. I've got brains and looks and personality. I want to use them instead of rotting in this dull hole.
It's very interesting to notice that the increase in fan mail, for example, for Margaret Lockwood, went up tenfold when she started taking on bad roles. Lockwood, in particular, encouraged female audiences to think that they could have it all.
I did desert my husband because he was a failure, and I don't intend to fail. No matter how I have to do it or who has to suffer, one day I'll get the things I want. And they won't be doled out to me on charity. And not you nor 100 others like you with your smug, self-satisfied arrogance will stop me. Get out of my way. Let me go.
Oh, no. I never thought to find a woman with a spirit as ruthless as mine. You take what you want and to the devil with the consequences. So do I.
The critics just laid into them looking for worse and worse things to say about them. For instance, the Manchester Guardian said about The Wicked Lady that it was an odd mixture of hot passion and cold suet pudding. And they said, Miss Margaret Lockwood, who might be the life and soul of a dull sherry party, is quite out of place trying to lend glamour to a beer-swilling thieves' kitchen. And that was one of the nicer reviews, in fact. The problem was that most of the critics were brought up in a tradition which valued three things: documentary realism, literary quality, and a middle-class improvement ethic. And the Gainsborough melodramas fulfilled none of those. They were defiantly anti-realist.
This highwayman has me in his power. He's forced me to rob, to deceive my husband. He swears that if I break away, he'll wash his hands in my blood, as he did with poor Ned Cotterell.
They were not based on respected literary sources. They were, in fact, based on popular pot-boiling novels by female novelists. And they were not improving, anything but.
Not so fast, Captain Jackson. I've not deceived my husband yet.
Then it's time you began. The careless fool deserves all he gets.
One moment. What of the jewels and the money?
Keep them. I can be generous if you can.
I like to drive a hard bargain.
So do I.
Mason and Lockwood were popular during the war. They were the villains of the Gainsborough melodramas. After the war, they're replaced by John Mills and Anna Neagle, who are the symbols of the older, decent, stable Britishness. And people identify with that, just as during the war, for a brief moment, they identified with those stars who let them let their hair down and behave in a scandalous way.
I had to have excitement. That's why I took to the road. But I wouldn't have killed anybody who hadn't stood in my way.
You? The highwayman?
Don't look like that. It was for you. Don't leave me. Don't leave me alone. Kit. It's so dark. So cold. Take me in your arms. Hold me close. Kit! Kit, I'm frightened. I don't want to die alone. Don't let me die.
The last studio head at Lime Grove was Sidney Box. In stark contrast to the wartime melodramas, he sponsored a more realist approach.
Joe, I wonder when we was last on our own like this, you and me.
Well, I can tell you when. It was on our honeymoon.
Ah, that was a lovely afternoon.
Remember we took a threepenny bus and walked right over the golf links to the waterworks?
Oh, Joe, let's go there again one day.
We will. The next Saturday after we get home, we'll go.
Oh, no, not that Saturday, dear. That's the Saturday you're whitewashing the kitchen. It'll have to be the Saturday after.
Well, I can't do that one. It's my dart match at the Legion.
Oh. Oh, well, we'll go one day.
Yeah.
His films ranged from domestic soap operas like The Huggets in Holiday Camp to extravagant and expensive historical dramas like Christopher Columbus. But British cinema was fighting a losing battle for audiences with Hollywood.
We're adrift in strange waters without even a compass to guide us.
That's a fact, Admiral.
It's a proof that we've sailed out of the natural world God meant mankind to inhabit, if you ask me.
I didn't ask you.
When he first moved into Gainsborough, his terms of reference was that he had to do, I think it was either 18 or 20 pictures a year, which is quite an output. And a year later, he was having to do 28 pictures a year.
You couldn't do that.
There are some things even I can't do.
Don't flap. I'm going for the pass.
Cast off the moorings.
Come on, roll up, roll up. Plenty of room inside.
And don't be melodramatic.
I'll kill myself.
She won't do it.
Foxy! Shut up. Look at that. Look, another blasted half-minute.
Up and down like this.
No, you can't land here. You'll kill us all.
Does it ever occur to you to wonder where the money's coming from?
Well, we came in one morning thinking it's just going to be a normal morning and people were all looking sad, and they said, "Have you had your letter?" I said, "No." They said, "Well, you go and get your letter. We're all being made redundant." And this was the letter when I opened it, and this was it. It was our redundancy note. It was 4th of March 1949, and we were given 1 week's notice.
By the time I came to it, it was closing down. I actually directed the last picture to be made there, and we finished the picture at the same time that the money for the studio rang out.
He must be rolling in money. Well, of course he is. His father left him over $1 million. I don't suppose a little thing like the currency law means a thing to Reggie. No doubt he's got black market contacts all over Europe.
What a godsend. We can borrow from him.
I wouldn't borrow a penny from Reggie, not even if I was at death's door.
That's one door where you won't need a penny.
Oh, hello.
My agent was negotiating a 2-year contract with Sydney Box, and it was going to be signed at the end of the week. End of the week came, the shutters had come down, and I think, God, I never got my 2-year contract. So it was rather sad.
Dear sir, unless we receive your check per return for the 6 months' rent now in arrears, we shall terminate your lease forthwith. That, my lad, is a final notice.
Oh, that's nothing. I've had worse notices than that.
This isn't a joke.
Don't let it worry you. They can't turn us out into the street.
Well, maybe I'm wrong.
Sydney called everybody, the whole lot together on one of the stages when he stood on the rostrum and made a very impassioned and sentimental speech.
He spoke to them honestly, and he told them that there wasn't any more money, that there wasn't any more work.
Tears beginning to come into his eyes, and everybody got very sentimental as well, and we all sort of wandered off. And I was wandering down the corridor just behind him when he turned round to me and said, "Do you think I overdid that?"
When Sydney Box closed down Lime Grove in 1949, he closed down the most prolific film studio in Britain. But even before the days of film, Lime Grove had been an historic site. Gaumant's Glass House Studio had been built in the grounds of Urania Cottage, where in the 1840s Baroness Burdett Coutts, the richest woman in England, and Charles Dickens, the novelist, established a charitable home for fallen women. Their aim was to lead them back to the paths of virtue.
Can't you see a paradise, a cozy nest that's heaven blessed? Just say the word and it's yours. Close your eyes and visualize. Can't you see those friendly skies? The golden blue are there for you. Just say the word and it's yours, dear. This beautiful picture I'm painting with dreams is more than a picture. It's heaven for two, for me and for you. So close your eyes and visualize all the things you idolize. I promise you eternal spring, and darling, you can have everything. Just say the word and it's yours. Say the word and it's
I haven't. Oh, so, hello, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and I hope you're enjoying the programming as much as we're enjoying programming the programs for you, so to speak. Now, a little later on, about sort of 10-ish, we'll be showing an episode over there of the classic series, Professor Quatermass. I'm sorry, Professor Quatermass, the first episode indeed, and it is titled Food. And I must say I'm rather peckish myself at the moment. And any moment now, we'll have a sort of filler, which we call an interlude, which is sort of treading water televisually, and see if you can kind of make out what we're going to be showing you now, any moment in...
What's just happened. The producer just came down and asked me if I would fill in for a few moments between your programmes. I was frankly livid. Me, I said, I'm an actress of great calibre and note. And he said, no, darling, you. And he walked all the way over there, came all the way down the stairs and just demanded. I said, now, listen here, chummy. I'm not doing that, not for anyone. I want a script, makeup and bigger bosoms before I say another word. And he said, now, listen here, you're on a contract. Huh.
And now, Mr. Trevor Philpott introduces some of the finest short films made for the popular daily program Tonight.
Tonight was the first nightly magazine program on television. It broke the ground and set the standards for all the rest. It set out to give the ordinary man a place and a face on the television screen. And we didn't find ordinary viewers sitting around in the television studio. We had to get out into the streets, the homes, the factories. And to do that, we had to learn to use film. And soon viewers did get to feel that Tonight was their program. They'd ask us to go down their way and let the world know about their problems. In particular, Fife Robertson became a sort of national ombudsman, though there were some problems that were just too deep and terrible for even that wise and kindly judge to resolve.
Until 3 weeks ago, the people who live in this house at Dipton in County Durham could draw the curtains in the morning from this window and from the companion window down there and get a pleasant glimpse of the Derwent Valley to the right, and in front of them the garden and bungalow of their neighbours. This is the view they get now when they pull the curtains. 2 solid brick walls, 12 feet high, completely covering both windows. They've been put up so close to the walls of the house that you can just get your fingers in by the next door neighbours. It is Mrs.